All right, and welcome back to Do It Wrong Yourself. Today we're going to be installing a level 2 electric car charger inside of our garage so we can get this nice lovely green glow and get high-speed charging at home. So follow along, let's see if we can mess some stuff up. Check down in the description, there's always some pros that are lurking down there that'll give some tips and tell you all the things I did wrong. And let's go ahead and get started. So here's a quick rundown of the finished product. This is where we're coming through. My breaker box is on the opposite wall. Run down here, bend there, come across, joint there, come across, come into the main box. There's the power in, there's the power out. So I ran that down underneath my stairs here so we can stay along that wall. Up, loop around the cord however you need and plug in right there. Easy access. All right, so today we're gonna be installing this electric car charger in our garage. We're gonna show you all the steps you need to take in order to install a level 2 charger inside of your garage. We are gonna be working with electricity conduit wires, so if you're not comfortable doing this yourself, now there's kind of 3 choices. You can do one, a hardwired install like I've got here, where we're completely hardwired from the box to our breaker box. And this is gonna give you the highest rate of charge. This requires a 60 amp breaker and it will give you up to 48 volts of charging. In my case, that's about 25 miles per hour on my truck. The next level down is doing the same thing, so it's still a dedicated charger, but instead of being hardwired, you'll have a plug like this, which is a NEMA 1450 plug. So there'll be an extra, instead of this hardwire right here, there'd be a cord coming in here, and this would plug straight into a NEMA 1450 outlet, and that's gonna give you around 40 amps, and in my case, maybe around 19 miles per hour of charging. So that's kind of maybe the next level down. The third level down is you'll actually just use your mobile charger that comes with your car, and you'll plug this directly into your mobile charger, and then that would still go into a NEMA 1450 outlet, and that's gonna give you a maximum of 30 amps, or in my case, maybe around 13 miles per hour or something. The reason why I decided to go with a dedicated charger, I don't need 25 miles an hour. For 99% of the people, even the mobile charger plugged into the NEMA 1450 will give you enough charge speed overnight to have you more than full for the next day. I initially thought it was gonna be. I thought I need the maximum charging, but I actually have had my electric truck now for 2 weeks without charging installed in my garage. And I've realized that really I could have got away with any of the 3 methods and that would have been fine. Now I have lots of little kids, I got little girls, you'll see in my videos, and they like to run in and out through the garage. And I didn't want to have a 1450 outlet and then a charger plugged in and cords kind of everywhere that they could access and reach that are about this tall so that they can't accidentally pull a plug and get shocked. Now this particular charger that I've got, it's called the Wallbox. I'll link down in the description if you're interested in this one. One has a small profile and I really wanted to get mine over here in this corner stud. I wanted to have my charger separate so that I can run my cord on the ground and have it over there by my truck where I can plug it into the little safety spot. Now if you go with a 1450 outlet box we're going to be plugging into, everything's going to be the exact same in the build I show you here in just a minute. The only difference is that for a dedicated box like this, you need a 60 amp breaker in your breaker box. If you're gonna have the 1450 plug, you need to have a 50 amp breaker in your breaker box. Now a quick couple of distinctions between hardwired. You'll only need 3 wires that are 6 gauge with hardwire. With a NEMA 1450 plug, you're gonna need a 4 wire 6 gauge run. Also with the breakers, for the hardwire, the 60 amp breaker does not need to be GCFI protected because it's hardwired directly into the charger and the charger unit itself has that protection. However, with the NEMA 1450 plug, depending on your municipality and the current code you're on, you may need a GCFI breaker that's 50 amps, which are about $100 more than a regular 50 amp breaker. And I've heard that those can sometimes actually cause false trips between the charger and the 1450 GCFI breaker. So just a couple of things to consider as well. If you are going to be using a NEMA 1450 box for your plug, you'll want to make sure you get an industrial NEMA 1450 plug. I'll link to a couple down in the description. They are a little bit more pricey, but they wear a little bit better, especially if you're going to be using a mobile charger where you're plugging and unplugging quite often to take your mobile charger with you. Get an industrial one, and that'll save you a little bit of trouble there. Heads up, the industrial ones typically have a slightly larger diameter plug. So that if you buy a faceplate to put over on top, you need to make sure the faceplate matches the charger plug as well. And finally here on the 1450 box, if you're going to be installing one, make sure you orient the plug in the correct direction so that your charging cord from your charger comes straight down and plugs in. sometimes this can be thought of as upside down, but you want to have that cord nice and straight. You don't want to be putting that on a bind, so make sure you double check that. And now just a few miscellaneous things you might need at the hardware store. Of course, you're going to need some conduit starting at the top left, a box if you're going to be doing NEMA 1450, some clamps, a pipe bender. If you're not going to be using your own bender, you can buy pre-bent 90-degree angles and just use connectors. You're going to use some nipples to go through the walls, some conduit connectors, things that go into your box, of course wire and wire cutters. And then the very last image is if you're going to be using Romex, you would need one of those in order to attach into your box. All right, so this is my breaker on the outside of my house. My garage is just right back here. You can see my meter here comes in here, and then this is the main 150 amp breaker that then goes into my house. My main panel is actually up on the second level up there in the utility closet. So if I flip this switch right here, it'll actually shut power off to my house. Now also, if I flip this breaker off here, it's gonna kill both of these. So both of these will be dead. However, it's still gonna be hot on those lug nuts right there. So you still have to be careful. Again, if you're not comfortable, get an electrician to do this for you. So in my case, you can see I've got my main lines going into my house right here. And if I look right through that hole, if I shine a light, you can actually see the drywall on the other side. However, I'm going to have to punch out this hole because I just have 3 6-gauge wires coming in, and code doesn't allow you to just run 3 loose conductors in an existing hole like that. They have to come in and tie in to a slot and be separated. Technically, if I had them in Romex, I probably could come in this hole as long as I'm below the fill percentage of the hole, and that's a pretty large diameter hole, so I'd probably be okay there. So what I'm going to do here is I've got to knock this guy out and then drill through my plywood. You can see this is set up here on my stucco. There's actually not stucco behind this. It should just be plywood. So I'll knock this out, go straight through, and then that's where it's going to come out my garage, go down, and then run along my floor like I'll show you here on the inside. Okay, so here on the other side, I'm ready to bend my first piece of conduit, which is going to come out right here at the wall. And I've got a little mark here on my wall, and that's where this little piece is going to hook into. So that's going to go through my wall to my breaker, and you can see my conduit is going to come right up into where that line is on the wall. So I took a measurement there and measured from that line on the wall straight down to my floor, and that ended up being 39 inches. So that's the sort of the length of the vertical piece of conduit, 39 inches, and I'll show you how to bend that perfect. All right, now some of the slack is going to be taken up in the bend. So my 39-inch mark you can see is right here. And on most of your pipe benders, they have a little arrow, and that arrow actually goes on the 6 inches slack. So for 3/4 inch conduit, which I'm using, you want to subtract 6 inches, so 39 down to 33. If you're on a 1/2 inch, I think it's 5 inches, so you'd actually go to 34. So when I actually bend this, I'm going to lock it in there so this little arrow here is lined up with this notch. That way, when the bend is all the way complete, it'll be 39 inches at the bottom of the right angle. So 39 will be there. Okay, so I've got this one lined up. Remember, that's my 39-inch mark. That's 6 inches back. And I'll go ahead and bend this. So you just want to make sure you have, a flat plane, lots of even pressure on this, and I'm kind of a lightweight, so it takes a little bit. You just kind of pull straight back, get your initial bend, you stand on this and put pressure as you're pulling. And I'm going to do a full 90 degrees, so I got to come all the way back. I want to go a little bit more than 90. They make a level that you can actually, a magnetic level you can stick on here as well. I'm just going to eyeball it. That's pretty close right there. All right, let's test it out and see how it looks. Okay, so now you can see I've got it laid down. Here's my 90-degree bend. So you can see down there, there's my 2 original marks. And if you come over here and see, you can see we're right at the 39 inches. So that's how you do a bend to get your edge. So now I need to go do the other bend on that side, and then we'll be set. All right, for the second bend, it's kind of just the same. So I've got this guy lined up where it's going to be going, right? And it comes down here. So my second piece of conduit, of course, is going to hook in there. So I just measure that distance over to where I want it to come up, and then make a mark and do the same thing, subtract 6 inches so it'll come over and swoop up just where I want. Now for me, I'm going to be mounting this in the corner so it's kind of out of the road. So it's going to go right here. And my cord, the charging cord for the car comes out here, and my hookup is on the left side. So I want my conduit to come right up here to the left side of this stud. So in other words, right, it's gonna come in, plug in right there. So all the way down, just measure on my tape measure, right? And get that measurement, and then we'll bend one more and we'll be set. So that ended up being 72 for me. So there's my 72 mark minus 6. Make a little arrow this way so I know. Whoops, sorry, not 68, 66. Make sure I get 6 inches there. Cross that one off. All right, so right, that's where my little arrow is gonna go on my bender pipe, and we'll bend this away. And there it is. So that's lined up there. You can see that's gonna go up. Now, this is just fortuitous. I was thinking I was gonna run out and I was gonna have to cut a little 1 or 2 foot section, but I'm just gonna mount it right where this conduit ends, so I don't have to do another little extension. So that worked out just about perfect with 2 lengths. So a little lucky there, got an extra length, but won't need it. So now let's go ahead and thread that through. So I'm gonna push that through and then we'll tack this to the wall and then get over and punch our hole through to the breaker. Now make sure before you feed your wire through your conduit that you sort of unravel it. You don't just want to pull and have all these kinks and rolls. So you want to unroll it kind of just like you do with a hose, right? You kind of flip it in the opposite direction. So I'm just kind of flipping this left around to get all those rolls out so that it lays out nice and flat before you can kind of see here. Now it's nice and flat and straight and doesn't have all these rolls and kinks. Make sure you wrap your end like this with tape. Wrap all these conduits, your conductors together with electrical tape so that when you run them and pull them through your conduit, it's a lot easier and they'll all go through at the same rate. You don't want one to get stuck in the middle. So wrap that up, and you can see in my bend, I actually stuck mine through my pipe before I bent it, but typically you'd have your run done and then pull the wire through. But if you're just doing little small pieces, you can definitely run them through and then bend along the way. That's just fine. All right, so the last little bend here you have to make is, at least on this particular unit, probably for a Wallbox too, if you're doing a NEMA 1040 or something, is you got to get your conduit to this kind of little S type of a bend right here at the end, so it'll, you know, pop into wherever your hole punch out is. Now in my specific box, again, I just opted to use the left hole here. The center hole is actually 3/4, but these holes are actually inch. So I needed to get this little reducer. This is just an inch down to 3/4. They come in a pair. You put one on top, and then there's also one that goes underneath right there. That way your lock knot will lock down and you can reduce down. So the reason I opted for the left one here is because my wires are going to come straight and they can just go right in here. My 2 conductors and then the ground, and then the same thing here. This is the actual charging cord that comes in this one. Of course, I undid that one so I could get it underneath my stairs there. And then also by having my conduit just left of the stud here, that allows me to use these little guys. So this will, you know, go right into the stud. This, of course, isn't fastened all the way tight yet, but you can run a couple of these little anchors down in there, and it'll seat right in the stud, and then hold your conduit nice and tight. So to bend these little S-curves on the end, it's fairly simple. It's the same process we kind of did before. You just grab your pipe bender, and you kind of just do 2 bends. So if this is your pipe and you're doing a little S, you'll start your first one kind of, you know, down here-ish. You'll just do a little bit of a bend, right? Because you're only putting maybe 5 or 6 degrees, just so that pipe kind of comes up and curls up a little bit, kind of like at this angle. And then you'll flip your pipe upside down, flip this guy around, and then just come to the very end and then bend backwards the other bit. So that'll kind of put the bend that goes, you know, up and then straight again. So that's all I did there to get that little curve right there. So next we're just going to put a couple of pilot holes in our marks here and then mount our plate. And my drill battery's dead. All right, let's see if the old drill gets her done. Actually, I like this drill. It has this little magnetic thing right here. And I use it all the time, and my new drills don't have that. This guy just sets right down on there. This slides in. And then there's 2 screws that go in right here so that that thing can't come off. And yeah, good to go. So now we'll run the wires back up in here and tie all that in. Now I can't really show you this one-handed, but these little lock washers here on the bottom, you can see they're loose. And the way you do them is you kind of get a flathead screwdriver and you get up in a corner like that, and you just tap on the other end with a hammer, and that'll kind of like that, right? Tap that around and you start tapping this side. That'll cinch that down nice and tight to lock those nice and snug. All right, so here's my wires run up here. Now I'm gonna do a little clean cut on all these because when they cut them at the store, they cut them at this big weird angle. So cut all those off straight. Okay, Now we need to strip these each back. It says 1/2 inch in order to fit into here. And of course, I've just got these little wire cutters, meant for 10 and 12 gauge stuff, and this is 6 gauge. So I'm not gonna be able to strip them. So what you do is you just pull one down and you just kind of score it. So you use this your cutter area right here. You just kind of lightly pinch in here 1/2 inch or so back like it says. So kind of about right there. And then you just lightly score. You actually don't want to cut all the way through because you don't want to cut those little copper strands, the individual strands. When I screw these guys in to, these are my 2 hots and then the ground over here, it tells me in the manual for this unit that I need to do each one at 11.5 pound inches. So you'll want to definitely get a torquing wrench if you don't already have one, especially if you're doing a NEMA 14 plug, NEMA 1450. You definitely want to make sure that when you're screwing these terminals into your plug, wiggle those around, seat them, wiggle, screw, and then make sure you get a torquing wrench and torque those down to the correct spot. Same within your, of course, breaker box when you're terminating that. Okay, and this is pretty much all done. So you can see I've got those 3 tied up. You can see underneath there, that 1/2 inch, how they sit in there. And of course, these are not yet torqued. I actually don't have a torquing wrench, but my neighbor does, so he's gonna let me borrow it. And I will torque those down. And then I've just gotta replace the ribbon, close that up, and this is ready to go. So now we are going to go out and do the breaker box stuff where we punch through the wall. Now, normally you'd actually punch through the wall first. You'd have all your conduit lined up, but I've already gone out and pre-measured. I know exactly where my hole's coming through, and so I kind of did it a little bit backwards, but normally you'd punch through so you make sure you have your conduit exactly where it needs to be. So let's do that next. So here's what it looks like with that tab now knocked off. So I'm going to go ahead and then start to drill through here. You can see the tar paper there. That's the sheathing over the little, or the tar over the sheathing. So you want to go nice and slow when you're drilling here. This green wire, this green ground wire, I actually could see from my flashlight. It kind of goes in that hole and then dives down to the right. So I want to make sure I don't drill through and hit that green ground wire. So take a drill bit, a wood drill bit, and go nice and slow. When I started the process, I used what's known as a Forstner bit, which has a much smaller point, so it's not going to go through the wall as far. So you can start with that. I started with a bit that looks just like this, but my bit was so dull I couldn't drill all the way through. So I ended up switching to a regular wood bit you'll see here in a second. So I switched over, and as the foreshadowing video showed earlier, once I got drilled through here, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get all the way through the wall very easily with my wood drill bit. And it turns out I hit a stud directly behind this sheathing. I was actually about halfway, so I kind of halfway was on a stud, halfway off. So what you'll see on the other side, I actually had to come in at a slight angle and adjust my plan, but that's why you want to do that. So then here on the other side, since my bit was already dull, I just decided to use the Forstner bit and drill through to get a nice hole. And you can see that I had to come to the right of my original mark because of that stud. So my pipe is going to go just at a slight angle. It ended up working fine, however. So you can kind of see here, this is a little part, right? So you feed your wires up through here. You unscrew the little plate right here. This allows you to then pull your wires out and then feed them through this way. So they make a couple of different ones of these. They have, some that come out here, some that come over here, and different styles here. So what I'm going to do is I'll then feed my wires out this pipe. Then I'll be able to put that right through my hole and pop it out there in my breaker, and my wires will be ready, and I can screw the plate back on. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm actually going to leave them in the pipe just like this while I put this through in here, just so I don't get them all loose. Here we go. Now I'll go make sure those are coming through fine on the other end. All right, so that's coming through fine on the other side. So I'll just finish snaking these guys up and around. There's kind of a little bit of a tight bend here when you come through, but that's the way these guys work. At this point, it's probably easier to pull from the other side, but there we go. So perfect. So you can see they just snake right in. Then I get that plate, a little plate right here. It has a little gasket on there to prevent water. So then that plate just Goes back on there, then you have a little access point. Of course, you'll tighten that down, then put on your clamps. So you can see I've come through here, and you want to put one of these little plastic inserts. Sorry, my finger's in the road there. A little plastic insert there just keeps the wires from going, and then of course I've got my bolt there, the little lug to tighten everything down. So that's all cinched up and he's nice and tight. You know, white can go there, black there, white there. Both wires could actually be black. It doesn't really matter the color here. So both going to go in there, and then so this is going to go like this, of course. So both of these will go into the breaker, and then the ground wire is going to go up here into the ground bus. Again, because it's a 60 amp breaker, I only have the 3 wire. And once that's in there, right, this will just seat right in there and then pop in there. And then once I'm done with that, I will turn this main power back on. And then after that's done, I can then turn this back on. So assuming, right, everything's down and properly torqued. So the last thing I'll do is turn that on, and then go over and double check the actual charger, make sure it lights up and everything's good to go, and then we can plug it into the truck and make sure it's happening. All right, so I tied in the breaker and put everything back together. I actually didn't get that in film. My camera battery died, and I needed to get the power back on in the house before I got that charged up. So I got that tied in, and here we are turning on the Wallbox app for the first time. So we flipped the breaker. Sure enough, the Wallbox app lights up here. You can see it turned green. Had to download a little update when I downloaded the app and install the update to the app and kind of flash a new little firmware to the box. And then sure enough, after I updated the settings, you can see it connects here correctly to my Wallbox and shows that I have now 48 amps available for charging. So we're going to go over here to the truck. This is the Rivian R1T electric truck. I have a video on that in my channel. You can just click and see a little review I did on that. It's a really awesome truck. So we go ahead and plug everything in here. It took mine a minute, so it probably took 10 or 15 seconds, and then all of a sudden it finally figured itself out and started charging. It was only the first time this happened, but you can see it turns green. It lights up, meaning it's charging. This is now dark blue, kind of purple, and you can see it's pulsing. You can turn off the light, which I did eventually. And now here I am in the truck looking at the dashboard, and you can see I'm charging at 21 miles per hour at the full 11.5 watts. And finally here, because I used a black and a white wire instead of 2 black wires, you'll actually need to take a piece of electrical tape and wrap it right around the white wire, right where it connects into the breaker box. This is so that if anybody else comes and looks at your breaker at a later time, they know that the white wire is actually a conductor as well, so it's hot. So you want to do that for code as well. I hope you enjoyed this little sort of mini tutorial here and learned a tip or trick along the way. Post any comments and questions or tips you may have down in the comments section. And again, look down there. There's always some great tips and comments from some of the pros who may have some suggestions for you as you work to add your own level 2 charging for your electric car setup. We'll see you guys in the next one.